Shingmeitog Tramrirabling Yende Genpadi Sange Shingdu Mikte Uwar Gindrokunamdak Shingaju Parsho Vyam Gururana Mandrakam Niryatayami Sange Jurang Shoki Chojunamna Jamchun Bandu Dakmi Kyasuchi Daki Jinyangi Besunaki Rola Benchir Sange Krupashuk Sange Jurang Shoki Chojunamna Jamchun Bandu Dakmi Kyasuchi Daki Jinyangi Besunaki Rola Benchir Sange Krupashuk Sange Jurang Choki Choknamla Jamchun Bardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Jinyan Gipe Sanaki Rola Benchir Sange Krupashuk. So what is this whole course about? What is the whole course about?
Correct perception.
Yeah, it's about pramana, valid perception. And one thing I found out when I was researching for this class, which I already kind of knew, but I found out the extent to which this is important in Buddhist study. So when the little tiny monks would come to the monasteries, they were just little. They didn't know how to read. They didn't know how to write. And the first thing that they were taught to do to read and write was logical proofs. So they studied what's called dura, the collected topics. And they would learn basically just logical things like if something is red, it can't also be white. It's one or the other. Right? Just these logical, simple things. And then they just continue to study it and study it and study it for the rest of their time in the, what's it called? I want to call it a nunnery, but it's not a nunnery, the monastery. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to use our reasoning and our logic. But how is it that we get from pramana into past and future lives? Like, what's the connection? It's kind of weird, right? Like, why all of a sudden did we go into this whole thing about the Buddha? And then the reasoning of the forward order, the reasoning, why were we using reasoning to think about the Buddha in that way? We were using reasoning, right? Well, we were talking about pramana. It's about pramana. And that led us to think, well, who is a person who does have totally valid perception all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And that would be a Buddha. Somebody who doesn't have, do you remember the ones that are not correct pramana? Like doubt. Mm-hmm. Like not perceiving something even though it's presenting to you. Mm-hmm. Like thinking a snake is a rope. Like perceiving something but getting it totally wrong. Mm-hmm. They say recollection is also not a valid pramana. What was the other one? Assumption. So a being who doesn't have any of those types of wrong pramana, but they only have direct valid pramana, a Buddha. And then we went on to prove why that would be the case. Do you guys remember that from last time?
Is that the 5 qualities he has?
Well, we use those. Yeah, we use those things to prove why a Buddha would have only correct perceptions, right? The reasoning of the forward order.
Is it because he explains suffering?
Yeah, exactly. He explains suffering. The Buddha explains suffering, and that, to us, who may not have seen that, is quite an eye-opener. Like, even good things, and that's why they're inherently suffering, right? So somebody that could see that, who really could understand about suffering, must have had a valid understanding of it. because when we look and we see, oh yeah, it's true. It's true, even the things we think are good end, and so they must be suffering. Right? So then we're like, okay, he protects us because he's taught about suffering. Something that we can't perceive, and then we use our logic, well, if he can do this, that must mean that he must have escaped suffering. He must be outside, because how could he have perceived that unless he was outside of it? So he must have gone to bliss. That kind of makes sense? He must have gone to bliss. He must be outside of suffering. And if he has gone to bliss, he did this because he taught about emptiness. He's like, this is the way to get to bliss. So he must have had a direct pramana about it. But why would he teach it to us? Like, you might know about suffering, but why would you bother teaching it to anybody? Why don't you just be happy by yourself? Well, he taught because he cared about us, right? He saw our suffering, so he had this compassion that drove him to teach. So, I mean, this is a very formal way of proving to yourself, but a very simple and easy way is just to look at your teacher. Right? They'll prove it to you over and over again that there is a path, that they've traveled the path, and everything that they do, right? Everything that they do that's outside of suffering, right? Hopefully we can perceive it, begin to perceive it. So this is the importance, I think, of a teacher, is that they can really inspire us towards the path.
I think I missed most of that. Okay. Like the classes.
Yeah.
But so someone, like you said, that he had to have escaped suffering to be able to explain it. Is that true? Like, so if someone explains something that hasn't been heard before, it must mean that.
See, that's a great point. Does it? No, not really. Like, that's kind of an assumption, isn't it?
Yeah.
But maybe it was the way the Buddha lived, right? So I think you missed the class where we went through the types of pramana. So there's either you can directly experience something, like I taste a strawberry, right? Or we can deduce something. And when we deduce something, so there's direct pramana or there's deductive pramana. When you deduce something, you can either use your reasoning. For example, you can't directly see that there's a clock behind my back. Maybe you didn't see it though, but you can deduce that, oh, there was a clock there, I saw her pick it up, now there's a clock behind my back. And we use that type of reasoning to perceive things that are hidden to us. For example, emptiness is hidden to us. We call that. Then there's the other type of deductive, which is relying on scriptural authority. And we use that one to perceive things that are deeply hidden, like karma, like why I even see a clock, right? Why I even see myself as a human being. And then we went through ways that you determine how do you know if what the Buddha is saying is true or not for you? How do you prove it to yourself? Because, as many of us know, the Buddha wasn't saying just take it on face value. He was saying that's pointless. You have to test it. You have to make sure it makes sense to your own logic. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything about it. Right? It will just be some belief that you have. So that is what you're doing right there when you were saying, well, it's not necessarily the case, right? You're starting to debate with yourself. Like, well, no, that's not necessarily true. How do I prove it to myself that that's true? And that's the whole point of this course. Tunji, can I trouble you for some tea?
Oh, sure.
Wait, whoever's no trouble at all. Hi.
Can I offer you a cookie too?
No, you can offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like some tea, Tom?
So the whole flow of this whole thing is that we're basically proving that a Buddha has this great compassion, which is one of the qualities of being a Buddha. And I think something that's really very worthwhile to contemplate is the fact Do you know what bodhicitta is? Bodhicitta, the wish to achieve enlightenment. They call the direct perception of emptiness ultimate bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta. And I think this is very relevant to the reasoning of the forward order. Why would the direct perception of emptiness be called ultimate bodhicitta? Like, why would understanding and seeing directly that, oh my goodness, this object has no self-nature. It's only because I'm forced to see it as a computer that I do see it as a computer. It has no self-nature. Why would that be called ultimate bodhicitta, the thing that would help all other living beings? That's something to think about and relate that to the order of that reasoning. So I was reading this thing on Lama Yeshe's website, and it was a question asked of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Somebody said, do you have to believe in reincarnation to attain enlightenment? Like, do you have to believe? And he said, forget about believing. You actually have to realize it. You have to realize in your own direct experience, not a deductive. You can use deductive to get there, but you have to have a direct perception of the continuity of lives. And that's what we're trying to do here today, is to see the direct continuity of mind, right, and prove that to ourselves. Because what we're trying to prove is that compassion can be great compassion, the compassion of a Buddha, can be developed over several, many lifetimes, they say, right? But it can be developed. If it was only within this one lifetime, we only had that to develop, what would be the point? We would never be able to develop this great compassion, great holy compassion. So I'm going to ask you, Tarji, because you're an ACI one. You took it. What defines the lower scope refuge, like Buddhist refuge?
I just want enlightenment for myself only.
So, what about what are you afraid of? Remember, refuge is like fear and faith. It's like I call the police because I'm scared there's a burglar, and I go in faith that they'll protect me from that. That's refuge. Fear and faith.
So I want the lower births.
You're scared of lower births, and you have faith that the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, is going to help you.
Yes,
right?
Help me. That's right.
So you're scared of the lower births. You're scared of something that's going to happen, not in this life, but in the next life. And that's just the basic, the low scope definition. So to be a Buddhist, right, you have to believe in this continuity of mind. It's just one of the basic things that you have to prove to yourself. And when I say belief, you have to have some kind of understanding about the continuity of mind. So last class, I'm going to give you guys a sheet. Did Mariska give you guys a sheet? This is this fantastic sheet that a woman named Karen Huzak made many years ago.
This one? Is that it?
Oh, no, that's the karma sheet. That's from next course.
Oh.
I'm going to give it.
Thank you. Thanks.
So you'll be able to use this for last class, this class, and next class. Because what the whole text was written at that time, they were disproving the Sharvakas, right? And the Sharvakas were saying, where could this moment of mind have come from? Did it come from a creator being? Well, if it did come from this creator being, how does this creator being exist? How did they exist? And then they give us two options, which kind of fall into all existing things. Either they're changing or they're unchanging. And last class we covered unchanging, right? So this is where the study of definition, which is also something the little monks study for a long time. Unless we have a definition we can all agree on, there's really no point in talking. So one of the problems that happens with translations is that to the Western mind, something that's called permanent, usually means eternal, right? A permanent God is like eternal. Whereas in the Tibetan traditions, permanent means it doesn't change, which means it can come in and out of existence. Does that make sense? I'll give you an example. That's a fantastic little thing. So is this permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent. It's going to go out of existence in the sense that it's not eternal, right? What about changing or unchanging? It's changing, right? It's changing moment to moment. There's things coming out of it, and okay, we know it will be destroyed. Now, what about the emptiness of this clock? The fact that I see it as a clock, a dog sees it as, who knows what a dog sees it as, but that clock is not inherent in this object. What about the emptiness of it? Is that changing or unchanging?
Unchanging, but
You know it all. It's not going to change. It's not going to get more or less. Right? The fact of its emptiness is not getting more or less, but it will go out of existence as soon as this clock goes out of existence, because there's no clock to be empty of anything. So that is something to think about and contemplate and try and see, yes, what do I think when I say permanent? Do I mean eternal? Do I mean changing, unchanging? So last class we were saying, okay, we're going to prove that a creator God can't be unchanging. Right? Hi. Hi, Nina. No, just make your way in. We're still doing a review, unbelievably. So we're going to prove that a God, creator God, is unchanging. No, we're not going to prove that a creator God, that it can't be unchanging. That an unchanging thing can't do anything. An unchanging thing can't do anything. This is a huge deal. This is like massive. Because we tend to think that a self-existent thing, if we think something actually has a quality, that means that it's unchanging. It means that we think it's unchanging. If I think this is a computer, I think it's a computer in a way that is a computer to everyone else. It can't change. Right? Or what if you say, oh no. Creator God is unchanging in the fact that he's always creating. He's always creating. That's an unchanging fact. Well, that would be like a chicken laying the same egg over and over again, right? The product would have to be exactly the same every single time, right? It would have to be unchanging. Any slight variation in creation would be a change. So that was how last class we kind of tried to clear out our minds of this idea of an unchanging creator, how it's completely not coherent. It doesn't make sense logically. And then last class we also tried to show, I don't know if I'm going to get into that. Maybe I'll just go straight to ours. We did a broad overview of what we're going to do today. So we're trying to see, why is it that a being is born with a mind? And can you actually prove that a being is born with a mind? Like, how do you know a baby has a mind? And this is Master Dharmakirti's first logical proof of a mind that exists in a constant stream from lifetime to lifetime. And that is, we can use our direct observation of the baby, or using a direct pramana. Look, this baby, it's breathing. Hi. It's breathing. It has sense powers because if I poke it, it reacts to that. Right? So obviously it has living tissue. And it must have a mind because it's crying. It's exhibiting some kind of emotion. So this is the first proof. We come into this life from the very first moment with a mind. So that might be a homework question. what is Master Dharmakirti using as a proof that we actually do come into this world with a mind? So the proof that the child is breathing, has living tissues, and displays anxiety. This is a proof that we can know, yeah, a baby comes into the world with a mind. Makes sense to me. I don't have any big arguments against it. Do you guys? Yes? So this is the introduction class, right? Introduction to logic. And if you have the reading and you're doing the reading, you'll see that they phrase everything as a three-part statement, a logical statement. So it's like this: consider that teapot. It is hot, then we say the quality, because it's in this room. Does that make sense? Consider the teapot. It's hot, quality, because, and then I gave the reason. It's in this room. Like, is that reason true of the teapot? Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. We'll get into that in ACI 13, later courses, which we're actually going to do pretty soon, for like 20 weeks. 20 weeks. So we're saying consider some subject. So consider a baby who displays breath, sense powers, and mind as shown by signs of anxiety. They are not something born from the body alone, because that is not something that is not dependent on its type. That's a lot of double negatives. So he's saying in his second proof is, well, where the heck would mind have come from? Where would this breathing and this life in this body and this mind, it couldn't have come from something that was not just like it. Because we went over last class the main material cause, right? You guys remember Nirlengigu? No?
Came from moments before.
Nirlengigu is the main material cause. So Nirlengigu is like the acorn, that without an acorn, and it's the main substance, it's the stuff that turns into the tree, right? I mean, water is not really the Nirlengigu, earth's not the Nirlengigu, but it's a seed, right? It's a seed. And what Master Dharmakirti is saying is the seed for a mind has to be the same stuff. It can't be anything else. So where, in this very first moment of existence of this child, where are these things coming from, right? It can't come from the body alone, because the body alone is a physical stuff. How could the physical stuff flop over into becoming mind or breath, right? It's like Frankenstein. So in the West, the idea is kind of the chemicals, right? Chemicals in the sperm and the egg, they meet, and then those flop over and become mind. Right? So what Master Dharmakirti is saying is a chemical is completely not like a mind. And we're going to go into this, because what we're doing is we're looking for, where is this mind coming from? Oh, here, look at what's Nina. Thank you. Changing. Okay, so mind. Where's it coming from? We're going to look. We're going to go big. We're going to go all knowable things, all existing things. And we crossed out unchanging last week, right? It can't come from something that's unchanging, because it's changing. So it has to come from something that's changing. It's caused, right? It's changing moment to moment. Okay, so it's coming from something that's changing. So, I mean, we could divide things differently. We could be like, oh, all existing things that are blue, things that aren't blue. you know, this is like a arbitrary, it's not arbitrary, very specific, but it's a certain system of dividing stuff, right? So just make sure to your own mind that it's covering everything. If you can think of something it's not covering, then we have to add it in there. So changing things. This is where you maybe let's think. Changing things, physical matter and mind. And I've sometimes seen a third as like things that are both. But for this case, we'll just say physical matter and mind. So then now in this class, we're going to go through these things. Is this where mind is coming from? Is it coming from physical matter? And physical matter, they've also divided into two. They have outside matter.
She did a similar flow chart last
Oh,
week.
good, good. Living, well, this is from last week. Living tissues. And this will be continued for next class as well. So living tissue. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, outside matter for elements. I just put them in the wrong order. So today we're going to go down this road. Okay. Is mind coming from outside matter? So when we talk about outside matter, you know, what could we say? The periodic table, all the elements. But in this system, we're going to say the 4 elements. So when we define the 4 elements, I thought this was so beautiful. When you're making a definition, something as a basis on which to, you know, debate upon, the definition has to have 2 parts. It has to kind of tell you the characteristics, but then it also has to tell you the function, like what it does. Like for example, cup. It's round and has a space in it, and it functions to hold something. Right? That's the definition of a cup. It's got this general characteristic and then a function. Right? It holds something. So if it doesn't have that function, if it can't hold something, it's not a cup. If it doesn't have the general characteristics, it's not a cup. So we're going to go through the 4 elements and the definition in this system of the 4 elements. The first part will be the general conventional characteristic, and then the second part is the function. So what they say is that everything has some combination of these 4 elements. For example, earth has the characteristic of being solid and being rigid, being able to hold something up. That's the function. So you could say that this floor has more earth element than this blanket. Because I can stand on this. You know, this does hold stuff up. It holds my pen up. But if it was all that was between me and out there, it wouldn't really hold anything up. Right? So water has the definition of being wet and flowing. It makes sense. Wet and flowing. Fire is hot and burning. And air is light and moving. So we're defining them because we want to know what is the substance of them. Is it similar in any way? Like, can it be the Nerlengi goo? Can it be the main material cause for my mind, the first moment of my mind? Like, can it? These elements, can they come together and poof, create a mind? That's what a main material cause does. It disappears, right? The seed disappears before it becomes a sprout. So can fire, something that's wet, something that's solid, something that's moving, can those things all come together and become mind? Right, that's what we're asking. It seems unreasonable if you put it that way because they're completely not similar. They're not even the same stuff at all. Mind, you can't touch mind. You can't feel mind. It doesn't have the quality of being hot, wet. Right? It doesn't move and burn and flow. It's not something that you can stand on. Right? It's not the same stuff. So that is Master Dharmakirti's third proof. It's just not the same stuff. Mind could not have come from these outside elements. So the Nirlengigu, the main material cause, there's two kind of things that it has to be. It has to be earlier, like it has to be prior to what we're saying. Like you can't have a sprout and then there's a seed, right? So whatever's the main material cause, it has to come before. For example, I come into an empty house and it's very messy, and only I was ever home. And then John comes home and I say, "Oh, you messed it up." But he couldn't have been the cause, right? Because he came after the mess. So whatever we're going to say is the cause of the first moment of mind, it has to have come before, and it has to be of the same nature. Right? So then he also goes into absurdities. Right? Do you guys know what prasangika is? Prasangika? Yeah, it's like a absurd statement. It's an absurd reasoning. So let's say we're going the other way. We're like, okay, yeah, maybe these four elements can become the first moment of mind, right? Okay. So if fire could become the first moment of mind, if the element of fire, what would that look like? Or the other way, like it would have to have like some kind of nature of mind. So fire would be like a little creature, it would be like a little kind of mind, right? Because that's the only way it could make a mind, right? That's an absurd consequence. Like water would have to be like little water beings, little wet and flowing mind particles. So proof number 4, we're not going to go through all of them today. Half of them are for next class. Proof number 4. Master Dharmakirti's on the debate ground and he's like, mind is not something which does not cross into the next life. So there's a double negative. So he's fighting with somebody and somebody's like, no, it does not cross into the next life. He's like, no, it's not true. It's not that it doesn't not cross into. It's not that it does not. It's not that it does not. Someone's at his face and they're like, no, it doesn't cross into the next life. It's like, no. It's not something which does not cross. Because where's the proof that mind doesn't continue? Like, why do we believe that mind just ends? Not we, but yeah. Go.
My question is mind is not something that crosses over to the next life, that someone...
Does not. Mind is not something which does not cross.
Okay, thank you.
Take out the 2 notes.
Because someone's saying, no, it does not cross. He's like, well, no, it's not that it does not cross.
So mind crosses over to the other next life.
Yeah,
So why
but
don't we remember?
why the double negative?
No, why don't we remember from previous lifetimes?
Some people do.
Some people do, yeah. They do.
People do.
Yeah.
But just because there's no proof doesn't mean that then that's just kind of what's the derived perception.
Assumption.
So
Assumption,
like,
yeah.
we still can't perceive.
Well, that's our whole point, is right. If we can't prove that I'm going to get into that. So it's, for example, we all right now, we understand that mind continues from moment to moment. And that would be why someone sends your child to school, because you believe that they're going to be able to learn something which will stay in their mind stream and it will go on and on, right? We wouldn't really bother to do any type of learning if we didn't believe in the continuity of mind. Just observe your mind right now. Like, is it going on moment to moment? It certainly seems to be going on moment to moment. So why would it suddenly stop? Right? We don't have proof that would happen, and we have a lot of evidence to the contrary. Why would it suddenly lose a main characteristic that it has, that it exhibits? It continues. Mind continues all throughout our life, from the time we're a child till now, until the future. It continues. It's like a quality of the mind that it goes on. So why would, at the moment of death, that stop? So Master Dharmakirti is saying there's a lot of evidence to the contrary that mind does continue. And where is the proof that it does not continue? So to stop us from assuming things, we just investigate and say, well, yeah, it's true. I don't really know. I don't really know why it would stop. I don't have any hard evidence that that's the case. So I'll investigate further. And it's very possible that it would continue because look, it already has this amazing quality of continuing moment to moment.
So it'd be almost, I mean, the mind is our memories in my perception. So memories are stored in our mind. So is this one way of looking at us is what we carry over to the next life?
Well,
or is memories different than mind?
So memory was actually defined in an earlier class as not a valid pramana. And that was part of the definition of a Buddha always has fresh moments of mind. Right? A Buddha doesn't have memories. But on the other hand, Lama Marut came to town a couple years ago and he's like, your memories in this moment of mind are your karma. That's your karma. The fact that right now I remember things this way. Right? The fact that the next moment I could remember things totally different. It's your karma. So
It contradicts a bit.
I think it depends on your definition. We have to go back to our definition of mind, which is not memory. The definition of memory is something different than mind. And mind is defined as, do you know? Yeah, it's clear and aware. Clear and aware. That's the definition of memory. Right?
Mind or memory? Memory is,
Sorry, mind.
so mind means clear and aware?
That's the definition. That's the definition. And we have to agree on the definition before we can, debate it. And there are big debates, about all these texts, about definitions.
So is memory karma? Sorry to interrupt.
Is memory karma? I think that is totally outside the scope of this class. And,
I'll leave it be.
yeah, I'll see if I can find what Lama Marut was talking about. It was very interesting and very beautiful. But karma is defined as
Karma is any movement of the mind.
any movement of the mind. Yeah, of which memory is a part, right? Memory is a movement of the mind.
attached.
So then I think you'd have to go into differentiating for yourself the difference between a memory and a direct perception. So that's class 4. Class 4, all the different types of pramana that you can have. Okay, so we're moving on to proof 5. So if the first moment of mind, if mind was able to come from these 4 elements, earth, water, fire, air, then any time you had those elements together, you would poof, you would have a mind. And that is Frankenstein, right? That is the idea behind Frankenstein. You put together a bunch of stuff and you have a mind. So that's not saying that they're not like the water and earth to the seed, right? You have to have these elements together to have a human life. They are contributing factors, important contributing factors, but they're not the main material cause because they're not the same material. So I was thinking about that when I was prepping for this class, and I started to think about cloning. And then I was reading, and it's like, oh, it pointed out that twins are clones. And I'm a twin. I have the exact same genetics as my twin sister. Our elements were the same, right? We had the same thing. So if it was the case that, the elements produced my mind and Camille's mind, wouldn't it be the same because it was the same stuff? Or did the same stuff all of a sudden produce two minds? Like, that's very interesting. It couldn't have been that the same stuff, if it would produce two minds, why wouldn't it produce 50? Why wouldn't it produce, this is the proof number 6. Would it produce, why only one mind when there's one baby? Or why would these elements only produce one? So that's the main gist of this class. We're trying to look for something that was prior to and of the same material as the proof of mind. And the reason we're trying to prove that mind continues past one body to another body to another body is so that we can realize that there's a path towards developing great compassion, towards seeing emptiness directly and escaping from suffering, to having perfect, valid pramana all the time, knowing what to take up and what to give up. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah, or disproofs?
Like proof number 5, could it be the case that we just haven't figured out the right combination of 4 elements?
Well, if it was the case, we were if those 4 elements, the right combination, were producing mind, they would produce it every time somebody was born. It would be the right combination every time somebody was born. Right? And we're saying in that proof, I know what you're talking about. That proof by itself, you can say that too. But if you start to consider, well, but it's not the same stuff, how can something that's completely dissimilar create a mind? Right? It's not the same material.
I remember I asked the same question last time.
Yeah.
So I'm still stuck on it, but I think it's
Yeah. You know who does a really beautiful expounding on this is Alan Wallace. He's a translator for the Dalai Lama, and then his Lama sent him back to become a physicist. And so he really has this beautiful way of explaining what he calls, not he calls, but it is called naive realism, I believe. Right? And he goes through the ways that science as it is right now has not been able to prove, they haven't been able to prove that mind comes from brain. Right? There's a lot of correlations between, what part of the brain is lighting up and what you feel or say or do. But science has not been able to prove that yet either. And he also goes through to the background of what was the goal of science. He says this beautiful thing, it just slays me. Scientists, when you go look at the early scientists, they were trying to get a God's eye perspective of the world. Like, what does the world look like when I'm not there? They're trying to get out of the equation, right? Whereas the Buddhist science is, they were all coming from, well, no, that doesn't matter, because who cares if nobody's looking? Is suffering still suffering if nobody's looking? Who cares? Suffering is something that is experienced from the inside out. So they got to different places, right? Like the sciences developed so many amazing things, like this computer, for example. Right? And then the inner method was able to find a way to eradicate suffering, which is something that's experienced from the inside out. So when you start to look at the assumption that the scientists had at the beginning, that there was possible to have an external world outside of my perception. Is that possible? Is it possible that there's a world outside of my perception of the world? And that's still where we're working, right? Between science and religion. Is that possible? And where can they come together and join together? So his name is Alan B. Wallace. And he's written beautiful articles about science and the Buddhist beliefs.
So what you just said there, does that mean that all perception, all your perception, everything you see has a trait of mind?
Can there be a world outside of your perception, and can you know that? Can you know a world outside of your perception?
What I'm coming to is that there can't be, and if there, and because of that, that means that your mind had to have a role in everything.
Yeah, which I believe is what they say, like relativism, like Einstein was saying, the observer has a big part in where that molecule is or how fast it looks like it's going, right? So it's a very interesting place to be doing scientific research when you start to take that into account, rather than assuming that there is a world that is outside of our own perception, that's God's eye perception.
What was the name of that bookcase? Naive.
I wonder if I'm saying it wrong. I think it's Naive Realism. You can actually Wikipedia it. I'll check it out. Yes, Naive Realism.
What was that proof again that you said? For why your perception has to be a role of everything?
Right. And was it number 4? No. Number 4. The proof is that right now, in our daily experience, we observe that mind goes on moment to moment to moment. Mind goes on moment and to moment to moment. So where's the proof that it would just stop at death? Why would it stop having that characteristic that it always seems to have? Right? So it's kind of a negative proof. It's like, well, yeah, why is that? Why do I believe that it would just stop? And so by stop, why do I believe that it would just begin? Like, how could it just begin if it's not caused? If it was uncaused, then minds would just be popping up all over the place. That's an absurd consequence. If there was no cause to a mind, there could be a mind right here. So we decided last class that mind is changing, so it has to have a cause. And then we went through all existing things. We were like trying to figure out, well, where is this mind coming from? It's not coming from unchanging. Okay, well, maybe it's coming from something changing like physical matter. Okay, well, maybe it could be coming from the elements.
Well, the way I could be way off, but it seems to me, rather than narrowing it down to one, could it be that maybe all of these elements play a small role in
That's a
mind?
great question. That was last class too. Like, okay,
As
so
a plant needs more than just air to survive.
yeah. So is it all of them together, like a certain combination of all of them together?
Well, the way my perception is when I look at flowers, if I only give it sunlight and no water, it can't survive. If I only give it water but no sunlight, it can't survive.
Mm-hmm.
If I
But
give it no air,
sunlight is not the main material cause because it's not of like stuff.
but if I don't give it any air, it doesn't
yeah,
survive.
it
nor.
definitely needs
And
those supporting
if I don't give it
causes.
any heat, it doesn't survive. So it needs those 4 elements to a degree, as human beings need the same thing. And I'm wondering, is mind attached to the same elements as our physical being is attached to, to survive and to grow, to flourish?
So yes, they're definitely required cooperative conditions, definitely. And the proof that they are not what flops into mind is you can ask yourself, okay, if the elements, is it one element or is it many elements? It's actually for sense powers we're doing this. So if it's just one element that creates the mind, or many, that would mean, because if like is like, then every time you got cold, your mind would get less. Right? It's not the same. It's not the same stuff. But it's required to have a physical body, right? You have all these elements.
I can contradict that a little
Okay.
bit, because if I don't eat, I can't think straight. If I'm cold, I can't think straight nor because my body's trying to.
But do you still have something that's clear and aware? Are you aware of not being able to think straight?
Sometimes my whole focus and my whole energy is on that specific topic. If I'm not feeling
But there's
well.
still awareness, right? There's awareness. There's awareness that, oh, I'm cold. There's awareness that I have a mind.
But the percentage is the ratio's changed. My percentage might be, if I'm not feeling well, my percentage would be 80% on my physical or ego self and maybe 10% of awareness or 20% of awareness.
But awareness is what
changes.
underlies it all, right? Awareness is what underlies it all. Awareness is just clear and aware. Even when you're in deep sleep, there's awareness. All the changing, there's awareness of, I was just sleeping. Let me just look up that last class. The tricky thing about coming in the middle. There's one of the homework questions for the last one. Yeah, so it's basically the two things I said. It's not of the same thing. And if you removed one of the elements, you would also remove mind. Right? Or if it was just one element. It makes more sense when you do it with living tissue, which you'll be doing next week, right? This one or the many, right? Breaking it down. How could fire, one element, cause a mind? Right? Prove to yourself, it's not possible. If fire could create a mind, I could make a mind with some fire, with just that one element. Okay, so no, it's not just one element. Oh, it's all of the elements. It's like all combination of all the elements. So I put all the elements together. And if I just find that right combination, I'll be able to make a mind, right? Frankenstein. Well, then that would mean that, if you took out any part of those elements, your mind would diminish or grow bigger, right? You'd have, and then why wouldn't it just all of a sudden have many minds? Why couldn't you create that? And I think the main thing is that it's not of similar nature. It's not of similar nature. It can't be the main material cause. And if that part doesn't make sense, you have to look in your own experience for examples of, for example, you could be like, well, H and 2, hydrogen and oxygen, those combine, they make something that's different than them in nature, right? Water's not the same as hydrogen or oxygen. I proved you wrong, but it is the same. It's physical stuff. It's not mind. It's not clear and knowing, ineffable. You can't touch it, you can't pin it down. It could be in your fridge right now. That's your mind. There's hydrogen is like a physical quantity. You can measure it, pour it into something if it's in liquid. And water is also physical. It's a physical thing. So it is the same. So start looking in your own experience. Is it true that only like can come from like, right? What could be the cause of this first moment of mind? Thank you guys. Yeah.
This is on topic but off topic. Same. So the heart and the mind, they say, are separate. So you could be, they say, emotionally intelligent, or
Different types of intelligence.
yes, or intellectually intelligent. Right? And some people are balanced, others are not balanced. Now, does the mind actually work in harmoniously with this, or is this actually separate?
Well, I think mind would be all of the intelligences are a quality of mind. Right? You can't say it's a physical quality. Is your actual physical beating heart emotionally intelligent? You can't say that a physical tissue has intelligence like that, emotional intelligence, right? Because then you're saying the same thing as next class, that living tissue is mind.
But then the brain is separate than the mind, correct? They say
Yeah, brain is
Yes,
physical
physical
tissue.
matter.
Yeah, and mind is something that's clear and knowing.
And the heart is a separate.
Well,
It's tissue.
It's tissue. It's living matter, so it's the same as the brain in that sense. It's living physical matter. It's what you'll get into next time. Living
Okay.
tissue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Sorry.
It's okay. They all go together. These 3 classes. We could do like a full day of this. Well, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed the questions and preparing for this class and thinking about these things.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Sashi buki chukshing mito tramri rablinshi niende genpadi sange shindu mikte uar gindro kunandak shingla drupashok Sunam Meshe Sokshin Sunam Meshe Leishun Dampa Kuni Tok